Howdy, howdy, everybody. Welcome back to Urban Odyssey. Today is Sunday, May 3rd. The year is going by faster than ever than it has in my life. I'm almost 27, and time just speeds up like they said it would. Appreciate everybody being here with me today. I wanted to do, let's see if I can make myself a little bit bigger. There we go. Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to do a live kind of final episode for part 1 where we're going to finish up the Project Soulcatcher reading that we've done over the course of about 4 episodes, and give people just a chance to if they have any questions, comments, concerns, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a sneak preview for what we're going to do after this, because the reading was kind of a last minute insertion to the course. I didn't plan on doing that at first, but then I was using that this book, Project Soulcatcher. See, I think I have the graphic here somewhere. Let's see if I can find it, so I can put the cover up. Yeah, here it is. I didn't plan on doing that until after I had already made the course, and I was reading the book, and sorry, there it is. I was reading this book, Project Soulcatcher by Dr. Robert Duncan, and it was just so great at showing how computer hacking maps to biohacking, or hacking the human biocomputer, which is a big, this is probably the centermost part of cybernetics, is that they view human beings, the human body, as a computer. And I wanted to show that there is some truth to that. The way that the human body is designed, especially on the neuron level, is very much this word is isomorphic. We're going to talk about that briefly at the end. Isomorphic to computer hacking, but at the same time, does that mean that you can exploit that, or you should exploit that to control people? That's a whole different side, and that's why we're going to bring in the next couple parts, not the next part, but the part after that. We're going to talk about background processes called daemons, D-A-E-M-O-N, daemon, and how all of this cybernetics feedback loop is pretty much just old school diabolic psychology. Diabolic psychology being, how do demonic entities use temptation, imaginary, obsession, etc. How do they use that, and why is that exactly the same as what modern science calls a feedback loop? So we will get into all of that and more, but we've got a little bit of reading to do. We've got about 100 and we've read 100 pages so far. We've got 30 pages left. So let's go ahead and bring all of that up right now, and we'll get into that. Awesome. So this is where we left off, talking about how people can be manipulated to end their own lives using torture and what he calls depression signals. So all of that, organized harassment, targeting, that's very real. I found more than enough information to. The name of the page on Rumble, let's see if I can, got it right here, and I'll put it up for you. One more. Gotcha. There we go. Make that a little bit bigger. That's the Rumble link right there. Boom. There you go. rumble.com/c/mastersmayhan. That's the Rumble page. I know I've tried very hard to get something set up where I can interact with as many people from as many platforms, and eventually I did find a solution for that. Substack, I like that you can do live streams and stuff through Substack, and they're updating a lot, but the live streaming system does leave a bit to be desired. And so if people want to chat and do stuff like that, I recommend Rumble. YouTube also YouTube. I have a lot of problems with YouTube because, for instance, the other day, this weekend, you know, I wake up and I get an email, oh, this video that you uploaded a year and a half ago, this 3-minute video, we just don't like this little 2-second snippet from it, so we're just going to take the video down. It's just ridiculous. So Rumble, Odyssey, preferably those at Twitter, X, those are good. I'm on a bunch of different platforms, so it's really up to the user. So that is the Rumble link. Let's see, let me go ahead and put that away. I will get into it. Awesome. Cool. All right. So let's get through it. Shouldn't take us too long. And then we'll do a little bit of a summary of what we've talked about here, what the first chapter has showed us, how these mappings are very, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, not a problem. I appreciate everybody, no matter what platform they're on, even if the platform gives me trouble. The reason I'm on those platforms is for the people who find me through those. One thing that I do like, I will say this, Substack is the only platform that gives me access to my emails list. So anybody who subscribes to my Substack publication, they get anything I post, it gets sent to their email. So it's kind of like a newsletter. But if, let's just say, like, my whole Substack is like deleted tomorrow, I can back up all, like, as a CSV file, I can back up all those emails. And, you know, if I lose Substack, I will have everybody's email. I can bring those over to something else and I can get back in touch with everybody. There's no other platform that allows you to do that. You know, Rumble doesn't, Odyssey doesn't, YouTube doesn't. So thankfully people, you know, if people follow me on Substack, it's, you know, you can subscribe for free on Substack. There are options, you know, if you would like to be paid members, but you don't have to do that. There's no obligation to do that. So yeah, I'm on all the platforms, as many as I can find, and I think that's really helped. Instagram is nice. I put reels and shorts and stuff on there. So yeah, all right, let's get into it. Oh yeah, after we finish the reading here, what I was going to do was show you all of these different parallels. You know, here are the reasons why computer hacking and biohacking are the same thing, and we're going to use the word isomorphism, functional isomorphisms. But all right, let's get into it. Picking up where we left off on the end of page 99, page 100. This book will refrain from commenting on the obvious moral implications and shameful, disgraceful, and dishonorable conclusions people would come to if it were fully known how often these techniques were tested on random citizens to improve on the technology and scripts, kill effectiveness, and to illegally murder large numbers of people in the last 40+ years. Well, he doesn't have to say it. I will happily say that. I think a lot of my viewers already know. To have this type of technology, you have to test it. And so that's why they have, they call it the Gaza laboratory. So they'll have all these wars in the Middle East, they'll test it, all this software, all this technology over there. And then once it's perfected, they'll bring it back home. And so I was listening the other day to somebody, man, I can't remember who it was, but they said basically the proof is in the pudding that any of these technologies that gets used against, you know, civilians in the Middle East or just anywhere else, it always ends up back home. Always. 99 out of 100 times. Continuing, it says, but our researchers concluded that depression and suicidal subliminals were the first killing technique at the beginning of this top secret research. Suicide, whether staged or intentionally induced by this technology, is the most plausibly deniable way that the intelligence community does its cleanup. That's also a parallel to demonic activity because, you know, in the standard view, demons, quote unquote demons, can't touch you, and so they have to convince you to do what they can to yourself. So these are functionally identical, and I think some of the stuff that I'm going to present in later episodes is going to blow everybody's mind. Has mine. I've done doing this research I've got all kinds of notes and stuff on it. It's just, I couldn't put together a better case if I tried. They've done half the work for me, because you've actually got thought experiments called Maxwell's Demon, comparing these to Pandemonium. And you've got Moloch packets software. It's been renamed to Archime. I couldn't make a better case for it if I tried. With just the psychological techniques of the microwave hearing effect, they can talk the target to their death. But according to Jim Keith, a researcher who's now dead, they can use a 6.6 hertz brain entrainment to create depression and despair in targets, increasing the effectiveness. Entrainment, to entrain somebody. Well, to train, like training a dog to sit, you do it over and over until the dog responds to the trigger. For instance, every time the dog comes inside, you let the dog out. Every time it comes inside, well, you give it a command, and then if it obeys the command, you give it a treat. You do this enough time, and the dog will immediately know that when it comes inside, to expect a treat if it does, sits down in a certain place, etc. So to entrain somebody is what it means. But it's also has a connotation like a trance of sorts. To entrain somebody, to get them entranced and have a high attention. Amplification of destructive behaviors and addiction pathways. Speeding in the car, creating alcoholism, and heavy smoking are the most common types of signals that can be amplified due to the plausible, denial, and unnoticeable statistical patterns. But many other patterns of induced risky behavior are in the manuals of trickery in the CIA. Very few have the expertise or necessary equipment to do this kind of testing, again for obvious reasons of lack of financial resources or access before the death penalty was executed on them. Sure has crossed the Rubicon again, or built a tower to the sky. I like to say this, it's a tower built to the sky out of cards on a foundation made of sand. Shutting down and stressing the subsystems. Many computer programs are not stress tested. Stress testing, if you build software, you have to, you want to stress test it to see if it can withstand the stress. So, if we're going to have a website built and the website's going to have a lot of traffic, well, you have to test what you've built in conditions that emulate or simulate how much traffic you intend to have, to make sure that, maybe you don't have any problems when you run it locally, but then when you put 100,000 people on the site, well, then you have issues that you didn't know about before. That's stress testing. So he says many computer programs are not stress tested. Quality assurance software divisions load test applications, networks, databases against normal user loads and some extreme conditions. Trying to crash the program is the objective. But crashing a computer doesn't necessarily kill people except under warfare conditions. Redundant systems for failover are the usual method to handle unexpected conditions. Catastrophic failover can be compared to a shadow government taking over. It's funny that he makes that comparison, because there's another comparison by a Catholic priest called Father Chad Ripperger, and he's done a series. He did a whole 2 hours talking about how demonic influence and communism are the same thing, which is interesting because that's pretty much a shadow government if I've ever seen one. These comparisons just write themselves. I mean, you can use them interchangeably, and that's ultimately the number one proof of the connection, is that I could use them in a conversation interchangeably, and everybody would still understand. Yeah, shadow government taking over, catastrophic failure. If a government is taken out by a weapon of mass destruction, for example. In corporate systems, the catastrophic failover data centers are located far away from the active ones, probably underground, like under a ballroom or something like that. Malicious software can wear down the disk drive by thrashing it over and over-exercising the mechanical parts. Other techniques involve overclocking the CPU, which overheats and destroys the chip. Our focus is on the individual mind, but obviously scaling the model to governments and other organizations works just as well. There are many ways to destroy the human body and mind through these kinds of extreme stresses. Using neurological weapons, the brain can be damaged through high constant cortisol levels and neurotoxicity of overexcitement. This leads to neurotic, paranoid, schizophrenic symptoms. Similarly, the heart is damaged through the increased secretions of adrenaline over long durations of time. The heart can also be entrained to dysfunctional beating patterns. The Russians wrote about this psychic warfare technique in the 1970s, which is published widely, where a runaway adrenal process can be started in the brain, basically killing the target by a remote control heart attack, an extended panic attack, and spooking them to death. Physical health can be stress tested. Trying to overstress the system to cause damage is the objective of this technique. Damaging the plumbing of the cardiovascular system and overstressing it is a popular method for silent kills using neurological communication weapons. Heart failure, blood clots, and strokes. Moscow's remote-controlled heart attacks. A side note. The researchers of this book studied the effects of over 650 people in the United States being experimented on against their consent for human effects and efficacies of these weapons. One of the common experiments conducted on these subjects is perfecting remote heart attacks, arrhythmias, and other cardiovascular disease caused by prolonged stress, depression, and repatterning heart beating chambers over time. J.R. Sweet, I did an interview with J.R. Sweet. It was one of the interviews that I enjoyed doing the most. Obviously, if it was a subject that had a better connotation, and it didn't have to do with these types of subjects, it would be great. But J.R. Sweet was a survivor of monarch mind control back in, his younger years. He's been speaking out on it. Some of you guys might know who he is, but he talks about how he had a run-in with Dr. John C. Lilly. So John C. Lilly, he's not the only person to mention John Lilly, but he was the guy who invented the tanks of water, the zero-gravity tanks. And J.R. Sweet talks about how, they would put them into these tanks and they would do this type of stuff where they would almost shock you, shock your heart and make you die and then revive you. And they would do this over and over again. And John C. Lilly wrote a book, Programming in the Human Biocomputer, meta-programming. So he was the one who created this term meta-programming. And so there's absolutely no question that this cybernetic man is a machine worldview, materialist, it's a building off of materialism and Darwinism. It's a step higher than that. It's that, now more than animals, we'll turn you into robots and we'll make you whatever we want. So there's no question about his connection to MK Ultra Monarch. Absolutely none, because they coined the terms. Determining time until failure is an important metric in these weapon systems. All of these variables lead to congestive heart failure and many other kinds of silent, plausible deaths. Unfortunately, the more plausible and silent the death amounts to, the slowest torture to death known to humans so far. Particular sociopaths in the Pentagon and CIA order the perfection of these weapons on the world's population, including in their own country. They hide amongst the good Americans and taint all their reputation. Says this is the second of David Hambling's two-part series on plasma and electromagnetic weapons. Plasma is also of interest too. There's a lot of crossover in these fields. The brain has always been a battlefield, that it has. These tactics are identical to, if you would have done something like this 150, 200 years ago, man, that guy's being attacked by demons. We have to do an exorcism or something on him. What's the difference? You know, if these weapons enable the powers that be to harass a person in their own mind, you know, it's inside of your head. You can't escape it. You can't run away. There's absolutely no difference because there's, you know, no physical person near you. You can't escape it. So, absolutely the same. Controlled effects is one of the Air Force's ambitious long-term challenges. It starts with better and more accurate bombs, always, but moves on to discuss devices that, quote, make selected adversaries think or act according to our needs. By studying and modeling the human brain and nervous system, the ability to mentally influence or confuse personnel is also possible. The American military may want to attack the nervous system with pain rays and laser plasma pulses, but they're not the only ones. The Russians have long studied such systems too, including one weapon that could, in theory, remotely trigger heart attacks. In 2003, the Second European Symposium on Non-Lethal Weapons, Anatoly Korolev and his colleagues from Moscow State University presented a paper with the snappy title Bioelectrodynamic Criterion of the NLW Effectiveness Estimation and the Interaction Mechanisms of the Multilayer Skin Tissue with Electromagnetic Radiation. That's a great title. This is a study of how radio frequency weapons like the American Active Denial System affect the skin, after wading through a mass of technical data showing how complex the interactions are. It says we reach the punchline. The sensations modality, pricking, touch, pressure, goose flesh, touch, burning, pain, etc., depends on the field parameters and individual concrete human being factors. As a matter of fact, we can really choose the non-lethal bioeffect. It says the effects include sensations similar to those discussed previously, and more besides that. The paper discusses effects on cell membranes and affecting the body's normal function, including information transfer to the organs of control. At the same conference, V. Makuhin of Trimus Engineering Center in Moscow described electronic equipment for complex influence on biological objects. And when he says biological objects, he means you and me. His laboratory apparatus uses a modulated beam of radio waves to produce what he terms a disorder of autonomic nervous system, put forward as a possible non-lethal weapon. Makunin notes that there is no general agreement on how electromagnetic waves disrupt nerves. He mentions ion channels similar to those in the plasma paper, but he certainly seems to be seeing the same effects as American researchers. But it needs not be a non-lethal weapon. Makunin also mentions the effects of the change of electrocardiogram, what he calls function break of heart muscle. The vulnerability of the heart to electrical stimulation, including that produced by EM waves, is well documented. A non-lethal device would interfere with the electrical potentials that keep the chambers of the heart synchronized, producing fibrillation and rapid death. A death ray doesn't need to be a truck-sized laser that reduces the target to a smoking heap. A small device that stops the heart will do the job. Little has been openly published in this area in the public domain, but this may be the tip of the iceberg. We are likely to be hearing more in the future, especially if the Russians manage to find funding. I don't think we need tinfoil hats just yet, but a layer of conducting mesh built into the body armor might save a lot of heartache in years to come. David Hambling is the quote for that. Secondary and tertiary diseases caused by prolonged stress. Disease induction, such as diabetes, cardiovascular, and cancer, can all be triggered by cell signaling mechanisms controlled by electromagnetics. Adrenochrome damage, adrenal burnout, leaves the target a lethargic, sluggish, schizophrenic. These are similar symptoms that many were described as after being tortured in Guantanamo Navy base. Looks like some part of the page is cut off. It says cell signaling is part of a complex system of communication that governs basic cellular activities and coordinates cell actions. The function probably of cells to perceive and correctly respond to their microenvironments form the basis of development, tissue repair, and immunity, as well as non-tissue homeostasis. Errors in cellular information processing are responsible for diseases such as cancer, autoimmunity, diabetes, etc. In cardiac muscle, gap junctions between adjacent cells, something action potential propagation from the cardiac pacemaker region of the heart to spread and coordinately cause contraction of the heart. Many cell signals are carried by molecules that are one cell and move on to make contact with another cell. Endocrine, something are called hormones. Hormones are produced by endocrine cells and travel through the blood to reach all parts of the body. Specifically, signaling can be controlled if only some cells can respond to a something hormone, a paracrine hormone. Paracrine signals target only cells in the vicinity of the emitting cell. Neurotransmitters represent an example. Some signal molecules can function as both a hormone and a neurotransmitter. Example, epinephrine and norepinephrine can function as hormones released from the adrenal gland and are transported to the heart through the bloodstream. Norepinephrine can be produced by neural function as a neurotransmitter within the brain. Description of cell signaling mechanisms. One understands how diabetes can be induced, and the remote heart weapon works by stimulating the adrenal gland through neurological entrainments while simultaneously simulating the contraction of blood vessels and irregular heart activity. Stimulating neuro. Yes, it's unfortunately it's cut off a bit, but yeah, let me see if I can move myself a bit. Yeah, see the page is cut off there. Let's see. Let me move myself over to the other side. There we go. Yeah, unfortunately. Not all the pages are like that, just this one. Yeah, stimulating neurotoxicity is the set of signals used for menticide. Many diseases can be induced by just complex modulated radio waves. Cancer induction takes something to kill the targets, but useful in silent genocide over populations. Probably longer. That's what that was. Yeah, see now this page is fine. Something has developed many subrace dependent viruses for such uses. And this looks like a scan of some kind. Let me move myself over again. Yeah, ELF pulsed magnetic fields modulate opioid peptide gene expression in myocardial cells. Talks about how the influence of electromagnetic fields on gene transcription and translation is currently under study and debate. I'm not going to read all of that, but I'll scroll through it pretty slowly. There's a lot that they can do with these magnetic fields. Magnetism is very fascinating. And, you know, is all of the research that I've done over the last couple of weeks to, you know, put this together, it would very much seem like all of this is based on the same type of research that Tesla had access to. We're going to look at semiconductors in the future, how the manufacture of semiconductors involves some of the purest silicon crystal in the world. So it's a near perfect crystalline solid. Also, it's basically a form of alchemy. The steps to create a semiconductor are the same as the alchemical great work. Spooking to death. Inducing prolonged and intense stress on the target can cause heart failure and strokes. The techniques range from a runaway adrenal process. Let's see, try to get this better for everybody. Put that there. Put myself away for a moment. Techniques range from a runaway adrenal process to inducing heart arrhythmias and vascular contractions to raise blood pressure to unsafe levels in order to find a defect and weakness. Even during the free torture Bush eras, torture doctrines required a physician present. When purposefully torturing one to death, the rule of law doesn't apply. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Unfortunately, federal rule of law is simply don't get caught, deny everything, and dead men don't talk. Man, that sums it up. I love that. I'm going to have to save that quote. That's exactly how it works. Federal rule of law is simply don't get caught, deny everything, and dead men don't talk. Killing somebody with just information, cellular communication, and neurological weapons can be more difficult than one might suspect. It can take a long time in many cases, but the combined probabilities of thousands of different techniques add up. This is why they are spending so much money and human resources on perfecting this weapon. As an interesting side note, many of the behavioral modification to death techniques can be defeated by their faith in religion. However, religion can be used against the target too, using the voice of God and omnipotent techniques. It can't stop the torture, but it can stop the quick kills and use of human as an assassin for political and military reasons. Unfortunately, Muslim jihads are easily used by these techniques, while Christians have some defenses lest they are extremists. So the idea behind all of the, as I call it, Armageddon programming, which was tailored to the baby boomers, and that's why they're running the government now. That's why you have all of the people in the administration right now who are actively trying to create an Armageddon situation. It's because they were, this idea has been planted like a seed. You know, we, in some of the other videos, we look at the catcher in the rye. And so it's been planted ever since like the 50s, the 60s, for these baby boomers to grow up, and eventually, when they inherited the reins of the government, which now they have, it's pretty much identical, just, you know, adopted to the West. It's jihad, but a Western script. Bill Cooper called it Project Orion. You know, that's why there's so many of these, you know, real or unreal, you know, mass casualty events, etc. It's because they've adopted the same script. Generally, you create extremists and radicals by either torturing them or taking their family away from them. Stuff like that is how you create radicals. And that's why, you know, you do this in enhanced interrogation. No wonder that you have all of these crazy radicals in the Middle East. There's absolutely no question that that's what caused it. In part. Here's a diagram here. It says trends in cognitive sciences. So there's a fine dotted line right there. It says, let's see, external environment on the top, and then you have internal milieu on the other side. So it's like a veil, if you will. The potential stressor at the top comes over the line. Attention, evaluation, memory processes, subserved and supported by the prefrontal cortex, hippocampal formation, and the amygdala. The amygdala, again, I mentioned in a couple of the episodes, I think, but your sense of smell right behind, like, you know, where you would press your sinuses, like if you have a stuffy nose, you'd try to, you know, press next to your nose to clear your sinuses. Right behind your nose is your olfactory bulbs. This is right under the amygdala. And so smell is generally considered the best one of the five senses to provoke a strong emotional reaction because it's close to the amygdala. So it moves down to the hypothalamus. I did remember all of these at one point, but I can't remember all of them. The hypothalamus goes to the anterior pituitary gland, adrenal cortices, and down the circulatory system. And then there's two up arrows at the bottom here. It says cortisol excretion, and let's see if I can say this right, catecholamines. And I guess what it's saying is that those are what force this to go back up. Now, you see there's two lines going down from potential stressor at the top. I wonder if I can draw. That might be nice. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. So, yeah, you have these lines here that go down. There's two of them, and then you have four that go up. So, let's see if I can erase those. Yeah, okay. So I'm not necessarily sure what the number of lines mean. I don't know what 4 up means and 2 down. Maybe he'll explain it. He says spooking also involves many psychological techniques such as stalking and computer tampering. The CIA has been involved trying to create ways to scare, control, and torture. In physical renditions, barking, growling dogs, sexual humiliation, and playing on every weakness such as suffocation or threats against family are traditionally used by the United States government. If one studies crime families, one can understand how the CIA and some federal government agencies and financial institutions act as a self-protection racket to hide their criminal dealings. Remote renditions, different methods are employed. Threats to totally kill the person and their family are still used, but they have to be something that's cut off, since the physical threats must be implied, have to be believed, probably they have to be taken seriously. One interesting computer virus developed by the CIA/DOD can be inserted by the Communication Warfare Unit using the 802 something wireless protocols to any vulnerable computer in the world using satellites and HARP, like global communication systems. Specific viruses cannot be easily found by the average person using virus software. Virus checking software only looks for the most common viruses and those that spread maliciously that are reported. I got you, move that over. The CIA's viruses are not meant to spread from computer to computer and only attack the target machine, then purge themselves, usually so that they leave no trace. They are meant to be psycho-interactive and spread from the computer through the visual or audio ports of the human into their psychology and possibly thereby have the person spread the fear to other humans. This is where memetics comes in, the actual science behind memetics, and it's a very detailed science. There's a lot of interesting stuff in that. All of these subjects are connected to one another. These techniques are still classified in the general category of mind viruses and psychotronic viruses, despite the way the terror and fear is introduced into the culture. See psychoterrorism. An example of one such specialized malware spooking virus was captured by a government whistleblower. Graphic cards have their own processors and can run instruction sets. Many hackers figured out that they could insert their own code to be run in the graphics processors and not be detected by standard virus checkers. The semi-famous satanic spooking virus is used effectively to scare the hell out of the target. I remember those. Anybody who's been on the internet for a long time remembers the God, it was a big thing back in the day. You get somebody to sit down and do the maze, and then something would do a jump scare, and it would scare the hell out of them. Good old days. It says it only works if the conditions are right. It's the mode of attack that is placed into the human psyche using a computer with a video camera on it pointed at the target. The idea is to make the target see an image of him or herself as if they're possessed by a demon. This is accomplished by altering the aperture, exposure, and contrast parameters, creating an overexposure in digital cameras, movements showing teeth and eyes come out very spooky like alien lizards. The eyes look like slits due to the bleeding of the white into the dark space, and the teeth become sharp and pointed. See a screen snapshot below of this technique. This is what it looks like. I would be scared if I saw that too in my camera, like just sitting there doing something random and I just saw that of myself. I'd probably be scared too. Let's see. In addition to the scary images of the target, the overexposed background turns white using face identification algorithms. The target's rough image is put into the foreground while mixing in horrific images of people getting their heads cut off or something similarly horrific in the background. Since this uses a significant amount of computing power in real time, the frame rate tends to be fairly slow, around 7 frames per second. There is a variation on this spooking virus where the virus will find pictures most recently viewed on the target's hard drive, use face identification, then alter the picture with demonic red eyes that are quite subtle. Face identification is imperfect, so the technique doesn't always work. Included on this mysterious teacher CD, which I honestly, the more that I read this, I really am starting to wonder if the teacher CD is what got Robert Duncan in trouble, because he was releasing all kinds of software. If you talk about these things, that's fine. They can discredit you, no problem. But if you start releasing, programs and source code, that's a big thing. And he says that he gave examples in the CD of computer virus that is meant to drive the target crazy and decrease productivity by up to 20% using small nuances like switching keystrokes on the computer every so often. This is happening on, I think it was iPhones. People were talking a couple months back. They're like, man, I feel like my keyboard on my phone is just, something's wrong with it. You try to press a key and it gives you like you mistapped. And it had started happening to me on and off. And it was just weird, people were talking about, I wonder if they were doing something like this. And, I thought that it was definitely possible, but now that you read it in this book, they like to do little psychological things like that because there's very little chance that you will be detected, one. Two, it forces the person to lose confidence in themselves. They will say, oh, it's just my fault. I'm not seeing it right or something. Yeah, to make them believe that their computer's breaking down. This virus is also classified under economic warfare, you know, to make sure that everybody's buying a new smartphone every year, even though they're all pretty much the same. They haven't had a good new feature in a long time, as a matter of fact. A discussion question. Knowing some of the techniques of stress, induction, and torture used by the CIA, come up with a list of 20 human fears and stresses. Then think of creative ways of how to realize them in remote renditions, knowing the power of this technology. Disrupting human networks. One of the reasons to spook a target is to find out what their family and friendship networks look like. People run for help to people they trust. This might be useful in routing out a quote-unquote terrorist network, for example. As for government control, it is useful to disrupt groups and movements from organizing, informing, or protesting. It's like, for example, I've got maybe 2,100 followers on X, okay? And even the handful of people that I talk to, I'm friends with on there, even they don't see any of my posts in their feed. I get maybe 1 or 2 likes out of 2,000 followers. And this is, I'm not the only one. There's so many examples of people's posts being soft hidden. I've seen all kinds of stuff. For instance, there was a post, and this was about, I guess it was somebody from China, and they were talking about all the surveillance stuff going on. And so what happened was, if you send the post to somebody, it will hide the text. Like, the post will still be there. It won't delete the post or anything, but it will hide the text body of the post. They've got literally these advanced functions set up so that they can hide people's posts and content without anybody noticing it. Yeah, there's no question I'm shadow banned. I mean, from where I'm sitting, I don't necessarily think that, I don't know why or what got me shadow banned, but it's just obvious. It's so obvious. The last couple months, maybe 1 or 2 months, I've talked to over 10 different people, or seen more than that, of people just saying, hey, has anybody else's viewership been down? I feel like I'm not getting as many views as I have been the last couple months. And man, sure was. It was right after the whole Iran thing started. Okay, let's see. The Department of Defense has several contracts approved for lifelong studies of relationships, quote unquote. How could the DoD study the formation of relationships without spying on American citizens? Creating network connections through coincidences by design is an important way to order society. Because now we don't have conspiracy theorists anymore, we have coincidence theorists. People who have these theories that everything's just a big coincidence. The tricks to disrupt relationships can be physical, legal, and emotional. Even in the non-canonical Bible text, this technique is spoken of. God commanded Gabriel to trick the people into fighting amongst themselves. Gabriel was to go to the biters and to the reprobates, to the children of fornication, the offspring of the watchers, from among men, bring them forth and excite them against one another. Let them perish under mutual slaughter, for the length of days shall not be theirs. And that's from the book of Enoch 10:13. So generally this idea, excite them against one another. Well, the idea of the fasci, the Roman fasci, it's a bundle of sticks tied together, and to tie something together is to fascinate. That's where that root comes from, to fasten. But if I fascinate you, I show you something that just like you get tangled up in it. You're fascinated. You're wrapped up in it. And so that's where this whole out of e pluribus unum, out of many come one. So out of many, small twigs or sticks, you can tie them together, and then they become one stronger unit. Says, and so Gabriel instigated wars amongst the giants, the children of the Watchers. In the Quran, it is mentioned under trickery, where Satan and something those on the same side into fighting each other. Tricks people fighting on the same side, or on the same side to fight each other. Volume 4, Book 54, number 510, narrated Aisha. On the day of battle of Uhud, when the pagans were defeated, shouted, "O slaves of Allah, beware the forces at your back," that the Muslims of the front files fought with the Muslims of the back files, thinking that they were pagans. Hudhaifa looked back to see Al-Yaman being attacked by the Muslims. He shouted, "O slaves, my father, my father." By Allah, they did not stop till they killed him, I guess. Hudhaifa said, "May Allah forgive you." Urwa said that someone continued to do good, invoking Allah to forgive the killer of his father. He met Allah, he died. Divide and conquer strategies have been used by the USA in the Middle East. This helps disrupt oil monopolies. In Afghanistan, where the Cold War was fought, the United States used Iraq to something against Iran, who the Soviet Union was backing. The Soviet Union had interests in not allowing a union to form in the Middle East. And here's a research side note that's kind of cut off. Looks like somebody put this on a scanner. Let's see. Researchers of this book studied 30 groups that formed around the topic of mind control, torture, electromagnetic harassment, and government surveillance. I bet that is a fun club to be a part of. First, they have to a lack of resources. Secondly, they were very vulnerable to agent provocateurs, those trying to disrupt the group. However, something bickering is what actually led to their inability to organize and to speak from one loud voice. Racial hatred experiments by the CIA. Over 75 mind control experiments have been identified from the 650 interviews of American CIA human behavior modification experiments in the last 4 years. One of particular interest is creating and inciting racial hatred. Man, that's pretty much been like I feel like that's been the defining, unfortunately. I mean, it's like, I wish that wasn't the case, but that's been like almost the defining American pastime in the 2010s. Approximately 44% of those interviewed were conditioned and brainwashed into hating a particular religion, race, and/or sex during their years of being experimented on. In war theory, this is necessary to incite wars between groups. While perusing a world domination strategy, it is important to weaken the countries and groups that one desires to dominate. Unity creates strength. Exactly, it sure does. That's what it's all about. Dividing and concurring it, I don't know if that was a mistype, is the oldest warfare strategy in recorded text. Not only dividing groups who are forming, but inciting them to attack and distrust each other is the most important step to create a preoccupation rationale using a pre-war context of attrition. I'll put in, when I upload this to Substack and whatnot, I'll put links to the guerrilla warfare episodes I did, because last summer there was a release of a guerrilla warfare manual. and it's talking about the Contras, and this is how we can do stuff with that group in Nicaragua, but it pretty much is exactly what they've been doing with all of the racial movements and stuff the last 10 to 15 years. Because like I said at the beginning of this video, anything that they perfect, for instance, if they perfect guerrilla warfare in Nicaragua in the 80s and 90s, well, it'll make its way right back home when they make sure that it'll work. Because basically, we're worthy of a guaranteed strategy is what, I guess, what they see. Maybe we're a little bit above other people because, we don't want to try something that won't work. We have to make sure it will work. And then we will use it on Americans because, I guess they're that worth a little bit more than that. Let's see. In simpler terms, this means that behind the scenes, using various techniques that the CIA, KGB, and Nazi psychologists developed, you will get groups to fight each other in order to reduce their numbers, their will to fight another war, and exhaust their resources before you come in as the police force and take over. The techniques to create racial hatred are similar to all the others. It is a conditioned response using a combination of subliminal suggestion and pain signals. Biases leading to irrational hatred are usually learned through culture and parents, but it can be speeded up using the methods mentioned. Correlations between torture and pain signals and the presence of the characteristic to create despise is all that is necessary. The brain will naturally draw the conclusion that color, sex, religion is somehow related to pain, stress, and their demise. These subliminal messages using complex technologies beyond the scope of this article also speeds along the process. My guess is that the reason that works is because the person, the person being conditioned gets probably a dopamine response because you don't have to look, you just look at what you see in front of you. Like, you might have to go and do research or look at what's actually going on or try to otherwise find out, are you being misled or not? Or you could just look at what you see in front of you and, make your snap judgment on that. And so my guess is that it's mainly because that's the easiest connection in terms of what a person can make, unless you go and you try to figure out what's actually going on, which most people just don't. Naturally, propaganda and psychological warfare methods, information warfare methods, and media manipulation are important tools in doing this to any large group. Having control of both mind control technology, media, and propaganda plant groups is how the CIA has been able to overthrow many governments to put in a new one controlled by the US behind the scenes. It's all about information in what people need. You need to have information, and then that information needs to be about, hey, what do these people need? What is it that they will respond to? If they need, just as an example, if they need oil, and they will respond to, hey, can you get that? Okay, then we'll do what you want. Once you find out what a person, needs and what they respond to, all intelligence comes back to just manipulating that need. And there are different, human needs. 9 for the most part. I'm not gonna read this, and I'm gonna pause it, or go through it pretty slowly if you would like to pause and read it. It says now, Now, I of course know that the CIA has been doing this behavior modification and brainwashing research on people all over the world since their formation. The only world superpower won't talk about it, nor stop it. This is it, the greatest weapon of mass destruction of human will and minds ever conceived. That is the big secret. Man, let's see if I've got the quote. Yeah, I got it right here. Perfect timing for this quote. The problem with psychological weapons is that they are a double-edged blade with no handle. Any psychological weapon capable of destroying the enemy will also destroy the wielder. To deploy them is to destroy yourself. Discussion questions. Counter-espionage and countermeasures. We have also active measures by Yuri Bezmenov, which is pretty much one and the same as the whole guerrilla warfare mixed in with psychological warfare. Tripwires and detection algorithms. Computer scientists borrowed this concept from military culture. Tripwires connected to grenades were used to secure an area from animal or human attacks. In computer security, this is a means to alert the operating system's personnel that a cyberspace attack has occurred. They use hashing techniques to identify the changing of operating system files. One second, let me take a drink. A hash is a unique number using encryption like techniques based on an algorithm to produce a nearly unique identifier for any set of computer information, executables, or data. Substitution of modified operating system files is called a rootkit, which we talked about in the last episode. Shadow and puppet governments are analogous to rootkits, but most rootkits disable antivirus software and tripwire detection methods. It is like cultural warfare, where the people elected or put in charge disable the intelligentsia who might warn the general public that their country was overthrown. The Constitution, Bill of Rights, and international laws should serve as a warning to a populace of a country that it has been overthrown from the inside if they aren't obeyed. You know, that perfectly said right there, because we could get into it forever, but you know, I see people, they're like, if you don't have anything to hide, you shouldn't be worried about these flock surveillance cameras. Well, okay, you know, then why is it that that only applies to people like us, but the people who, you know, are running the government, they don't have to follow the Constitution. They can't even agree. You know, if you talk to a blue team or a red team, you have this Constitution means this, and then the other side says it means that. There's no objective truth, which means the whole thing just kind of falls apart even then. Because the meaning of the Constitution was that it was supposed to be objective truth. These are, you know, your rights given to you by God, objective truth. And so if there's, you know, not an objective truth, you have problems, put it that way. And so, you know, they had Kristi Noem, who was previously the Homeland Security Secretary, and she was testifying in Congress, and somebody asked, they say, what is habeas corpus? She was unable to answer the question, didn't even know what it was. And so what he said here, you know, if the people running the government aren't obeying the founding documents and they don't even know what habeas corpus means, it's probably a good sign that it's been overthrown from the inside. In the cybernetic world, there are several possible tripwires that could be used. Later, the reader will learn about the system. Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely how it works. Cycle out the old, here, I'll put it up. Cycle out the old criminals and bring in the new ones. Pretty much exactly how it works. And let's see. Lucky said on YouTube, some areas are getting flock drones as first response for 911 calls. I did a short reading or presentation of a document that was titled Unmanned Futures. It said, essentially it was by the UN, I think, and it's talking about how by 2030 to 2035 they want to basically transition to that all the way. They want to have drone policing and surveillance and stuff at least by 2035. And they, this is an official document. I'll put a link to that in the post or whatever. Probably that's what it's just crazy. They're so worried about going, quote unquote, going to space, to Mars, or building robots, or building bunkers, or what's going on in this Greenland. Most people have never been there, or what's going on in the Middle East, but they just can't get anything solved inside of the United States. It's a one world government minus the United States. Anybody in the United States, you're just going to have to deal with it. But if you have something going on anywhere else in the world, that'll be what we talk about for 5 weeks straight. Yeah, that's a good point. Here, I'll put that up. Infiltrating the government with AI software, I think that's probably one of the ways that they're doing it, because, for instance, the contracts for all of the congressional, I don't know, whatever software all of the people in Congress use to, handle their paperwork and stuff. Those, first of all, are, they're hosted, all of the data and the database is hosted in a different country, one. And then the company who built that software is just a who's who. I can't remember, I don't want to be wrong, but I think it was probably like an Israeli group or something like that built all of the software. So it's just crazy. I mean, yeah, well then back to what you were saying, you have a couple months ago, everybody started looking at all the government accounts, and they pull up like the Department of Homeland Security account was based in Israel, and then they removed that feature real quick. They made it so that you could not see where accounts were from, because people started noticing that multiple U.S. government accounts, that being, with the little gray check mark, those were based in Israel. So it's crazy. All right, let's get through it. Cybernetic world, there are several possible tripwires that could be used. Later, the reader will learn about the system called Christ. It's an acronym. I talked about it in the vocab video. It's an acronym that they've created for common human routines inference software technology. And they were trying to do that because, software technology, they were trying to get that acronym right. Yeah, I mean, there's the whole thing, honestly, about the corrupted software is I feel like this was probably actually multiple layers. I think this has happened over, multiple different incarnations. So like they create software back in 80s or 90s, and then they do it again, and it needs to be updated. And then they do it again, and, now they move the data somewhere. I feel like they've layered all of this influence, as you said, through software and AI and internet on government devices. I think that's an onion of sorts. How can one detect a mind hack that has occurred in an individual? Generally, this isn't a subtle process, and the target will have memories of the events. an observer would notice a change of personality. The brain prints would be altered, and traditional EEG, MRI, and PET imaging would show the differences if they had a before and after. Hypothetically, if the Russians and the US were in a secret psychotronic war, specific brain pattern echoes could be detected. Van Eck hacking and Tempest standards. The electromagnetic permissible emission standard, Tempest. There is freeware available from this source to perform a Van Eck hack of a computer monitor using a directional antenna. There is software to scramble such a hack from here in this teacher's CD. The game gets more sophisticated with NSA technology. Van Eck hacking allows one to reconstruct images from the information energy that seeps out from computer screens, computers, speakers, and keyboards at great distances. Tempest is the standard that secret labs must ensure they maintain in order to reduce the risk of a Van Eck hack. So that word standard, very important. We're going to talk about that more in later episodes. All of these things, for instance, Tempest standard that he just mentioned here. You have the ISO 222 standard that has to do with transactions. You also have packet, packet information structure is what it is. A packet is a standard format that information must be sent in. So right now, if I actually go into, where the stream is running at, on the stream, there's actually a little thing that says how much percentage of packet loss. So, if my internet was, slow right now, I would be losing packets. My stream would be sending information, but because the internet is slow or something, I would be losing some of that. Some of that would not be getting to the destination. And so the idea is that they literally govern all of these systems and algorithms through standards or specifications, or this is the way that you have to do it. This is the protocol. So, all of these are soft control tactics. You don't have to necessarily enforce through hard actions. You enforce through setting the rules. You have the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC. All of them are I guess you could say it's basically the rules of the game. And whoever writes the rules of the game, that is who has the advantage. Yes, you're right. Schrodinger's cat. When people don't when they don't eat, they get mad. That's true. Yeah, Schrodinger's cat's a fascinating thing. It has to do with, like measuring stuff in quantum states. You can't measure it. You have to approximate the chances or likelihoods. Yeah. Van Eck hacking. Basically, it allows the hacker to reconstruct images from information energy that seeps out from computer screens, computers, speakers, and keyboards at great distances. It's a standard that they have to maintain in order to reduce the risk of this hack. Similarly, synaptic amplification levels determine the risk of being mind hacked. Fewer the neurotransmitter reuptake organelles on a neuron, often more neurotransmitter that is left in the synaptic junction. SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, work because they increase the signals of neurons that use the neurotransmitter serotonin. Genetics plays a role in determining synaptic amplification levels too. By revisiting the model of a neuron, it becomes apparent why bioamplification occurs at lower power levels of influence with increased signal transmission between neurons. A neuron can be viewed as a non-linear amplifier with a comparator at the threshold. How does our perception model work, you ask? Well, good thing that's going to be part of this series. Let's see, probably within the next 3 episodes. We're going to touch on that before I end the show. I'm going to show you what the structure is. We're going to talk a little bit about inputs and outputs and stuff like that. I've got a few different books and stuff like that on it. One on how, the theory that consciousness arises out of what's called the bicameral mind, or the idea that perhaps the 2 brain hemispheres, or the conscious and subconscious, or perhaps the microcosm and the macrocosm, perhaps it's the interplay between those 2 things that helps manifest consciousness. But we're going to get into that, don't worry. It's very, I am of the opinion that it's probably not localized all the way. Maybe like a antenna of sorts, perhaps. And there is a calibrator frequency. You said, what if there is a calibrator frequency? Check out the first, I think it was part 1A of the reading. It's like when I first started this reading a couple episodes back, he talks about that. How is it that one person, like you could stand next to a person and they could be targeted and hear voice or something, but you won't hear it. Well, he talks about how there is, pretty much like what you said, there's a specific frequency or offset that is unique to everybody. Indeed, we are on the same frequency, and that's where that comes from. Okay. It says genetics plays a role in determining synaptic amplification levels as well by revisiting the model of a neuron. I already read that. Bioamplification occurs at lower power levels of influence with increased signal transmission between neurons. A neuron can be viewed as a non-linear amplifier with a comparator at a threshold. And it gives us a figure here. Typical S-curve brain signal amplification. Depolarization threshold voltage. Says the arrows represent the amount of neurotransmitter or electromagnetic energy transmitted to ion kinetic energy required for signal transmission to other neural circuits, depending on resting state amplification factors. These factors determine the level of difficulty of a mind hack. Indeed, absolutely. The conclusion is that those brains with the most activity are the best targets for psychic warfare. Their brain signals can be modulated the easiest by electromagnetic influences. Research for the Psi gene by the Science and Technology Division for a drug to induce this state is most probable. Synaptic junctions with excess neurotransmitter cause the base voltage of the cell to be further up the amplification curve. In order for biocommunication weapons to hack human minds at lower power levels so that it is nearly undetectable by others, the average synaptic amplification factor should be high. The head echo effect of radar imaging from the giant phased array fields is the coded term for a neuron response from a pulsed ion cyclotron resonance heating signal to see if there is an open port to further hack the mind. This is called pinging or port scanning in the computer hacking world. from that signal response, a bootstrapping method of further connecting the neural click streams and responses completes the cognitive model and the hack. This assumes that the MIND acronym, I think it's mentally integrated neuron duplicator, was not already in the vast database of personality profiles, as the CIA calls it. Let's see if I got the slides here. Yeah, 1 second. Mentally integrated neuron duplicator, MIND. This assumes that the mind was not already in the vast database of personality profiles, as the CIA calls them. Think about it like this: as you said. Let me put it up. Thought processes can be manipulated, not done. It's because the thought is it's a specific pattern of activity, you know. And so what they'll do is they will save those. You know, it's like saving your game on a memory card back in the day. You would save all, you know, this is what maybe you're level 10 and you got this much experience points or something. Your health is at this. It's similar to saving all of these patterns, and then they will put it into a giant database called the geopsyche. That's a good question. Let's see. How's it possible that we both know this? Maybe they're feeding us these ideas. I mean, with social media, everybody's got a feed that kind of learns what this is what you're researching, this is what you're looking at a lot, and this algorithm is starting to take on a mind of its own. It says, so in a way, there is an equivalent Tempest standard for mind, Van Eck hacking risk of the population. Okay, yeah, network analyzers and packet sniffers. Let's go ahead and let everybody go ahead and see this real quick. Gotta put this up. Couldn't not show you guys this. Let's see. Huh. This is basically was basically quickly removed when people started losing their mind. This was from a few years back, but yeah, there really is a software for network analyzing and packet sniffing, and it was literally called Moloch, but it has since been renamed to Archime. Let's see. There you go. Yeah, who knows? It may be at this point. Yeah. Moloch is a large-scale, open-source, indexed packet capture and search system, and Verizon is hosting the 3rd annual Moloch conference, and this was from 2019. And so, you know, they started to lose their mind because obviously, you know, it's kind of weird. And so now this is called Archime. They've renamed it Archime, and of course they've got the owl logo. So yes, they absolutely can. Optogenetics, essentially editing genes through light. So yeah, that's what we're getting ready to talk about, all of this right here. I just had to show you guys that because it's too good not to show you. All right, let me get back to the reading. Appreciate it, buddy. Thank you. Very, very much appreciate all of the support and, you know, just people I meet along the way. That really is the return I get. I do a lot of the content I do because I learn in the process. You know, by teaching something, you better understand it yourself. But also, you know, I meet a lot of smart people along the way, just people who are eager to hear the information, who realize that this is important, that it's very real, and because it's very real, a lot of people have suffered for it, and honestly, like 90% of those people have not deserved it. So, you know, it's real is one thing, but then people who understand that you have to understand this stuff, what's going on, and I appreciate meeting people who share that sentiment. So thank you for that. Okay, so that's what we're talking about now. Network analyzers and packet sniffers. Again, a packet. I think I actually have the. Yeah, let me put this up real quick. So this is how packets work. Data packets from one computer or machine to another. The data packets take different routes to their destination. A packet of information. So like my stream right now, from my machine and my network to whoever's watching right now, you know, it's sent as packets, and those packets, there's a standard and an algorithm, and they take these random different routes to the destination. But that's what packets are, so that we're all able to follow. Network analyzers are used in computer science to map out the architecture of computer networks. Packet sniffers like Moloch/Archime are used to analyze the raw data transmitted between computers on a network. In cybernetic analysis, humans use visual and audio communication via media channels and ports to communicate to their human networks. The FBI, CIA, and NSA use large databases of people to understand human networks. These systems can discover terrorist cells, spy networks, or organized crime networks. Sales analysts used mappings of power structures and corporations to get to the decision maker. This is a similar application of network analyzers. Echelon for the mind. Echelon was a project name for a global communication network analyzer. It has many sub-projects since then, and the name has changed. Chatter is a word used in the intelligence agencies to mean a gross aggregate of communications about a topic. Chatterbots play a similar role when probing and predicting opinions on an individual. These findings can be used on a population for purposes of prediction and control. Think of this as a better polling mechanism to predict how the general culture will respond to events or information. Imagine, in addition to scouring communication channels to root out potential terrorists, minds can be probed to predict violent crimes. See the chapter on Alice and Tammy. 1 second. I will put those words up for you. Alice and Tammy work together. Tammy is an acronym. Thought and memory interface. There's a few other things it can mean, but in this case, thought and memory interface. And then, let's see. And then Alice is artificial linguistic internet computer entity. So basically half of the people you come across, and it's like these people are just, they act like robots. Especially if you're on Reddit, because Reddit literally just admitted that they are doing social experiments on people to see if they conform, so to gaslight them using these bots. So that's what he's referring to. chatterbots for mind interrogations, also dream probing and dream interrogation supplement the information that can be obtained from email and spoken words. Taking advantage of the state of sleeping has been a traditional guerrilla warfare tactic. Armies, animals, and civilians are vulnerable while they sleep. This is the time to attack them. President Kennedy said in his famous speech that these are the tactics of the ruthless conspiracy, the tactics that demons use. Eventually, a system will arise that can read everybody's thoughts. New organizations of thought police and laws will be passed. This level of invasiveness is already being done to a small percentage of the population, but it will expand to everybody. Think the wrong thought and you can be re-educated or arrested with the flock security cameras. These techniques are already being tested with remote viewing spies. Antivirus software. Is there a way to stop remote mind hacks? Something equivalent to antivirus software on a computer. The mind has no firewall, so how can these kinds of attacks be defended against? In any cybernetic system, feedback and adaptive control systems are in play. Since the mind has no firewall, the only way to stop external signals from manipulating the brain is to block, jam, or scramble them. Stimulation of the negative covariance pathways in the mind's neural network in order to dampen the biocommunication signal is a theory of jamming. It's a good question. What is the universe's national or natural defense if something like this happens? It's a good question. Just my guess is, like, I don't know, maybe a big asteroid will just come and like blow the whole thing up. You know, I don't know. I really have no clue. Let's see. However, adding noise to the incoming information and the feedback loop can have serious side effects. While the target will cease to be controlled, they may exhibit bizarre thoughts and behaviors. The brain is very good at filtering out noise behavior. Yes, modern building materials made out of quartz materials that are similar to this, so that frequencies can be sent to homes and pasture wells. I've been looking into crystallography and stuff like that. I've heard that some people have had success in using specific crystals and minerals. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is much more sophisticated than that. I really am don't have any guess on it. I would imagine that there's probably these advanced mechanisms behind the way that, you know, the universe functions, but I guess it'll be one of those things maybe you'll see it, maybe you won't. I was going to say, I've been interested in the fact that some people have had successes in using different types of crystals and whatnot to alleviate their symptoms of, like, the harassment or whatever. Yeah, other strategies would be to dampen the bioamplification factor with drugs. This strategy has side effects, which would be to dumb down the target mind to make it less active. Major defense against cognitive warfare and mind viruses is simply truth. A way for the target to understand the methods employed against them. Sources such as this book, for example. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And there's something that I wanted to remember. My mind's just failing me right now. It was a good quote somebody had mentioned about that. China and other countries have created firewalls for the entire internet. They protect their culture from cultural warfare and viruses by filtering information access. But against these mind control weapons, little is known in protecting a population. Yeah, generally this whole idea, like, you know, I tell people all the time, it's very unrealistic to believe that we in the United States, especially, you know, civilians, have access to accurate information about, you know, what's going on behind the scenes in other countries, because there's a big wall around the internet. You know, they only want us to think of a place a certain way, and so they filter what information do we get from these, you know, maybe the Middle East or Russia, you know, what's going on in the government of Russia. Like, they don't let us see that. There's a big wall around the information that comes in. And so if you do see something like that, it would either be from contacts that you know personally, maybe family who lives there or something like that, or, you know, just an idealized kind of fake storefront. That's very real. And so I tell people that we really don't have any idea of what is going on behind the scenes in these, you know, government. Like, I don't think anybody really understands what is going on with the government of Iran right now. That's true. The Russians are rumored to use the woodpecker over the horizon radar systems on their populations in order to add protection against a psychotronic warfare attack by the US. I imagine there's something, now that I just thought about the answer to your question, I wonder if it has something to do with bells. You remember how they got rid of all the bells? Perhaps the bells were had an effect on maybe a defensive mechanism. That's just a guess, though. Just thinking out loud, it came to me while I was reading that. Passive shielding is ineffective against an adaptive attack system. Superconductor shielding would work in principle, but it is impractical and expensive. The only practical solution would be wide area adaptive jammers, which are technologically difficult to build. Mainly, why are they allowed to, other countries allowed to access our private lives? Mainly it's just because they have all these bloated intelligence communities. They have all of these clandestine people who have access to slush funds, who are given credentials and given, you know, all kinds of fake information to get them past certain roadblocks. And so I think, you know, really anytime you have an intelligence agency, you know, even any country that has an intelligence agency, they're always going to have ways to find information. I don't know if they'll get all of it or if they have the technological access, but if you have intelligence funding, there's probably a way to get information from anybody. It better be, if you know, if you're going to give if the government is going to give this agency funding, well, they're going to expect that it does its job. Passive shielding is ineffective against an adaptive attack system. Superconductor shielding would work in principle, but it is impractical and expensive. The only practical solution would be wide area adaptive jammers, which are technologically difficult to build. Firewalls. In a famous article titled "The Mind Has No Firewall," the author describes a not often discussed threat called psychoterrorism and mind hacking technology from an abstract perspective. Indeed, the human brain never evolved any mechanisms to prevent this kind of intrusion into its fundamental processes. However, the US and Russian governments have been hard at work since 1947 developing strategies against what used to be called psychic warfare. The evolution of this technology and information warfare tactics has accelerated The mind monitoring network not only allows for the ominous total control of every human thought, it is also a protection mechanism that filters a possible outside attack by another country. More on the topic later. I would agree with that. It's all about prediction. So it was decided many decades ago that the people have no choice but to give up true privacy and freedom in order for security and protection against this relatively new threat from outside their country of origin, as well as a way for governments to exercise more control, and there it is, predictability of the population. The illusion of privacy and freedom still functions almost as well as if it were real. The walls are cleverly disguised by a camouflage of choice. A computer firewall works by filtering what kinds of data are allowed through an outside information stream, usually the internet. It blocks data from being transferred to or from an outside source given a set of rules that describe the allowable items of transmission, the types of data, and the only appropriate transmission protocols. The same approach is used by total information awareness and control programs run by the U.S. Department of Defense. By controlling the mass media programming belief systems of a large percentage of the populace is rapidly alterable. The internet poses the most difficulty in controlling information. The tactic used here is to flood the key search terms with artificial intelligence, natural language created noise, so that it won't be relied upon as a source of truth, basically to poison the information. This practice will, in time, force most people back into the mainstream controlled information sources. The FCC watches the airwaves and uses the fear of fines as the method to filter information on those channels. But the capability to directly alter memory, mood, and information processing in a single individual human mind is becoming an increasingly popular approach. Literally, the mind can be made to block out or filter certain information. There is a famous example of how the mind does this naturally. In a 1-minute video of a sporting event, an orange gorilla runs across the field. People are asked afterwards if they saw the big orange gorilla. Usually, only one person in the audience remembers seeing it. The film is replayed, and many people usually accuse the professor of having switched the footage because they cannot believe they could have missed it. I remember this, we watched that when I was in psychology. It was one of the little things that we learned about. Pretty well said right there. If they believe, I think you said if we believe that they believe in magic, and the only magic there is truth and love. That's true. Truth, love, and will or choice. I think there's three. It's threefold. In the history of America, and even earlier, many topics were taboo to discuss without fear of serious repercussions. You could be burned at the stake as a witch, hung on a cross, or tortured in a dungeon if the wrong information was conveyed. Freedom of speech has never been realized as an ideal. Cultures have always evolved strict information controls for better or worse. One example of information that the public might agree should be kept out of the general awareness might be explosive science. Other people might argue that the people always need a way to fight tyranny should it arise. Pornography is just information, but many argue that it is dangerous. The minds of the community and changes acceptable behavior. Those that enjoy this kind of information would argue that it is the kind of culture they would prefer, and that people should be judged by their actions and not by the information they consume. Another example of why information might need to be so tightly controlled is in a paranoid military culture where loose lips sink ships. Direct selective erasure of scientists' minds who have previously worked in secret bases or on projects deemed so important that the knowledge they possess would be considered dangerous to the military establishment if it got out, would be a desirable method of filtering, containing, or purging information. The firewall technologies for a human mind operate at several levels. Currently, the monitoring of potential breaches is all that is watched by the Central Intelligence Agency. The automated key word and key thought alerting system is still being perfected. One of their main missions and true purpose of creation was to monitor and control all information around the country and the world. Generally, the public think this agency as the old-fashioned spy house, but that is only a very small percent of what they really do. Everyone has a unique brain signature, also called brain prints, and I think that's what you were hinting at. You said earlier about that, and we had talked in the Martin in the audience. If an individual's brain signature becomes too abnormal, it could be a sign of an outside country's mind hacking attempt. If an all-out information war began using mind hackers, a country might be able to protect the population by thought filtering. If a country could map every cognitive model of every person and keep it in sync with the original, then it could be used as a template to keep thought patterns within functioning parameters. This cognitive modeling technique was called Project Mind. I've got that here too. Let's see if I can find it. Yep. Mind. Many people's brain signals are stored and tracked in real time on supercomputers housed in semi-secret command, control, and communication underground ballroom bases in the United States. Yeah, they probably put them under like a ballroom or something like that, under the bedrock. At its core, a mind is a giant covariance matrix, or it can be viewed as a self-organizing artificial neuron network with some hard-coded structure. It models the click stream of neuron depolarization, patterns of a human brain. The mind cognitive approximation can be used to simulate and predict, as well as for filtering and monitoring. CIA and NSA have been experimenting with trying to create a firewall for the human mind, using cybernetic hive mind configurations of humans. They test ways to be able to interrogate a mind without revealing information to the target. You're right, and in crystals. The basic problem is that during mind melding, secrets slip bidirectionally. The tested solutions truly explain the CIA's journey into madness. Biological computers operate with the same rules as silicon computers on the most part. Silicon crystals. Networking structures are being tested. The person who acts as the firewall in the network must lack intelligence and knowledge of the program and protect objectives such as state secrets don't slip to the target. And here's a diagram. Cybernetic hive mind with a firewall. So basically you would have a front, just somebody who is kind of kept in the dark. They're a controlled asset, and they will handle the contact with whoever you're trying to interrogate. Thought stream filtering. just as the technology can amplify certain thought processes to obsessive compulsive levels, it can also be used to suppress and filter other thoughts. This could be useful for protection of a population. Let's say Russia starts using their phased arrays to beam violent messages and behavior over the entire population of the US in an effort to cause disruption and division. The defensive move would be to filter or divert these thoughts. Also, in the future, the people of the world may decide that there is just too much dangerous knowledge swimming around the internet that could jeopardize the whole human race, such as virus engineering, uranium purification, or maybe this technology of mind hacking. So they can literally put thought filters onto an entire population so that certain discoveries won't happen. Controlling the belief systems of large groups could have the effect of deterring rediscovery of certain technologies or simply diminish the interest in it. Whether this is actually occurring is disputed. Certainly, the psychological persuasion using movies and cartoons to spoof the existence of mind hacking using biocommunication as being a futuristic and ridiculous technology has occurred since the 1960s with great success. The umbrella industry of psychiatry has also been famously used to unscientifically discredit testimony of mind hacks. One famous survey done in the 80s claimed that over 25 million Americans believed they had had some kind of alien encounter. Over 20 million Americans have tinnitus, ringing in the ears of unknown origin, a universal side effect of those thousands of reports of severe mind hacking. Oddly enough, the average person is more willing to believe in aliens, ghosts, demons, talking to the dead, possessions, mass delusions, and psychics rather than to believe that biocommunication technology is real. Yeah, pretty much. There's a company that'll do that for you if you've got enough money. Yeah, they can figure that out for you. Because the experience of being mind hacked is so foreign, and because this is my adding this there, but because the technology and the wording, the words that are used are so advanced, people don't even have the words. And so that's why this can give a brilliant illusion that it's all alien technology. That's why I've been trying to build a dictionary, etc., of words that I come across. Speaking of, why don't I just go ahead and put up this little link for it so that everybody can see it while I take a quick drink real quick. This is my dictionary that I built. It has a shortened URL, dict, D-I-C-T, dictionary, dict.officialurban.com, and I built a dictionary of about 360 entries to date, and it's mobile friendly. You can search for whatever you want, and I've been trying to catalog all of these words and stuff that I come across because there's just so many of them. We've only got just a few more pages left, and we'll wrap everything up. Yeah. People, basically, because mind hacking is so foreign, most who are not educated in the field assume that it must be from another planet. Once the commercial segment develops and promotes it, it won't be as commonplace as mobile phone communications, and most people won't care how it works. Whereas he says it will be as commonplace. The other reason thought filters are being so heavily worked on is that during a clone or mind meld, thoughts go bi-directionally from every hive mind participant. Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. what kind of what was the words, or like what did you build it for? Obviously, during an interrogation, one would not want the target to be able to use the senses of the other individuals, nor read their memory. This is a huge hole in the current systems. Most of the research is being devoted to the development of tools to filter thought pathways. Even the user interface for the US Satan system, that being the silent assassinations through adaptive networks, because they just love those. They can't get enough of their little what do they call them? I'm trying to see if I can find the definition for that. 1 second. Yeah, there it is. That's pretty cool. You said you built a dictionary from the Webster's API. It's a live fact checker. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Even the user interface for the Satan system uses an intergalactic symbol set developed by NASA just in case the target sees through the EEG cloner's eyes. For the reason, the target will not be able to tell what country is doing the attacking, nor will they as easily learn the user's interface capabilities. It also plays into the thoroughly promoted myth of aliens running amok here on Earth. More details of the system will be discussed in next chapters. Yes, an opposing word like antonyms and such like that. It's very interesting. That's a great strategy to use in terms of, for instance, there's a whole thing I had with the Reget's Thesaurus, talking about how it can be used to find the family groupings of different demonic entities, which by that, different, for instance, you have Abaddon, then you have abdomen, you have abandon, you have abrasive. And so you have these similar characteristics of how words fall into a group. So if somebody is being afflicted with arrogance, you would go into a thesaurus and you would find arrogance, and you would find words that are, that also mean the same thing. And you can use that to make leeway or headway into, what did it call it? I can't remember what it said. Just to investigate those things, or to do deliverance. That's what it was, deliverance. Trace, route, and multi-levels of indirection. Computer hackers often reroute network traffic all over the globe before reaching a host machine. This makes it much more difficult to trace the hacker. Just like with phone call phreaking, using other innocent machines and networks to launch an attack is the best way to not get caught. PBX boxes are hacked for this reason, so that calls can be placed without being traceable. Using IP cloaking mechanisms discussed earlier, as well as encrypted delayed messaging to zombified machines, makes it also incredibly difficult to track the messages back to any other machine to be used as evidence in court. The concept for investigators of computer hackers is to trace the route back to the original hacker's machines or phones. In the drug trafficking world, the same is done to trace the networks to the kingpin. But nothing like this is done in the mine hacking world, since the US government does not want to openly admit it is being done. In the mine hacking world, this indirection can also be achieved by hacking the mind of a general, let's say. The hacker can then make them believe that they are developing their own mind network for their own country, but to use them to further their own ends. This level of indirection is very sneaky. They put that up there. Appreciate that. He says SpaceX IPO is the vehicle to distribute the paradigm. Musk must succeed with his IPO. That's a very good bet right there. I think you're absolutely right on that. There was a lot of strange stuff going on with that, but I bet there's a bunch of them that we don't even know about, because, you know, they have a vested interest in keeping that very hush hush. There's definitely more that we probably don't know about. Let's see. Yes, the sophistication of mind hacking has reached this level. There is a group who strategize about world domination using mind hacking technologies that jokingly refers to themselves as the cult of the mad cow, as homage to the infamous hacking group called the cult of the dead cow, who wrote Black Orifice, which is included on the CD which came with this book. Baiting hackers, the sirens of truth, to lure you. Baiting is a common way to catch criminals. In some circumstances, it is called entrapment. In other situations, it isn't. The idea is to see who is interested in researching what topics, who is trying to hack what kinds of websites or computers, who is trying to purchase what goods and materials. So they need to know and search for truth and bait and lure to find spies. But is the opposite true? Can one bait mind hackers or identify themselves in a data mining program to be mind hacked? Hacking the hackers. One of the greatest achievements hackers can do is to hack another hacker. I'll read it again. One of the greatest achievements hackers can do is to hack another hacker attempting to hack them. Usually a trace route is done to identify the hacker's address grabbed from a packet sniffer. And then I think that's a something scanner is used to identify services and vulnerabilities. Are there analogies in the mind hacking world? Of course. Scarecrow effect and decoys. Some very advanced theories are growing out of cybernetic research of how to create decoy minds and complex adaptive signals. Ideas to grow a virtual neural network that mimics many of the target brain's patterns given a particular external signal stimulus. Since the mind entrainments produce delayed, recognizable evoked potentials, a decoy could be created to lead the targeting signals astray, while the host mind filters out the irrelevant noise. The idea is to get the adaptive targeting system to loop indefinitely while locked on to the decoy. There you go. They have us fighting over the things of the past so that they can write our future. It's basically what George Orwell said. Let me get it right. He said, he who controls the present controls the past, and he who controls the past controls the future. Only a few, like 1 or 2 more pages left. It's a diagram, the wave bubble. It sends out opposite waves to cancel incoming waves. The objective is to decorrelate the brain entrainments from the radar. From the radar active sensing and return control signal. It can be analogized to a car that gets stuck in ruts in the road. If one can steer the car out of the ruts, one can gain control again. Purpose of government is to keep society on the brink of destruction. Yeah, and see, that right there is effectively a feedback loop, because, you know, you create a group to solve a problem, but then if the problem gets solved, the group doesn't have a job anymore. And so that's a feedback loop, effectively. You know, It was created to solve a problem, but then it has to keep that problem around so that it justifies its own existence. Other techniques to create signal scarecrows and decoys would be jammers, ion density fluctuations, moving sheets of metal, frequency jammers, same pole magnetic field sweeps, and pulses. The trick is forcing the adapting beam formers and adaptive filtering algorithms to keep chasing a different pattern. Another is forcing dominant brain frequency to the alpha state using similar neural feedback methods away from the 4 Hz frequencies, since psychic warfare uses this range of entrainments. Another, microwave hearing effect at close range to override other hypnotic commands. Says these instruments aren't available to the public. You're right about that. Word loops are perpetual machines. One clever way to disrupt the tormenting microwave hearing effect is to induce speech pathology. One method to disable human speech a person can experience in most science discovery centers. Humans learn speech with a feedback method of auditory and bone conductance. That's probably exactly what it's about to talk about right now. Bone conductance hearing is why our voices sound different to us when played back on recording. Putting on headphones and then delaying the sounds we are trying to make with our throat, tongue, and mouth disrupts the necessary feedback, and we cannot speak properly. That's one of the weirdest things ever. The CIA's hypnotically entrained forced speech is also disrupted in this way. It too relies on this artificial hearing feedback loop. In the 650 interviews, there were no targeted individuals that were deaf. Interesting. Usurping eye tracking, virtual interface controls, and audio commands. Steve Mann, who leads the MIT Cyborgs and whose equipment is composed of wearable computers with heads-up displays, said, "In the future, there will be little evidence that a human is wired. As their eyes keep crossing to view the images, other people will probably think they are possessed by the devil." If there are other humans included during a cloning attack and not just a mind virus, artificial cognitive model, the possibility of hacking the attacker's interface exists. You will read in the next chapter about several active military systems developed out of many agencies. There are flaws with all software programs and system designs. To make this counter hack more difficult, NASA developed an intergalactic symbol set that is not recognizable by any nation. It resembles a collection of symbols taken from the world's many cultures. I would probably bet that this is that weird font. And, if you go and there's a font that's all symbols, a wingding font. I think it might be that. I could be wrong. Shared visual workspace of all Hive members includes what they are looking at. If one is at a console, the visual interface is cloned to the target. The eye gaze movements are also cloned bidirectionally. This gives the target an opportunity to explore the interface and a force of will. To counter the opponent from taking control of the eye gaze tracking console, a 2-person team is often used, one cloner and another who operates the console using verbal cues from the cloner. But this configuration is less scalable and has additional problems such as verbal cues that can be heard by the target, and since everything is bidirectional, the target can still control some of the verbal cues. That's it. So those are the discussion questions. If anyone wants to pause and look at those, and let me pull up the little bit that I wanted to kind of give you a sneak preview I also, for anybody who would like a copy of the full book and, who wants to continue reading it, I might do more reading in the future, maybe from other books by Robert Duncan. But in the posts for this series of videos, I included a download for the text. So if you guys would like the full book, please, by all means. Yeah. And so I really just want to give you guys a little preview of what I'm going to talk about next, because now that we have established that there are all of these, near perfect one-to-one mappings, that will give us a much better start into what we're going to cover next. Let me go ahead and share my screen over there. Let's see. Okay, let me bring myself back up so everybody can see me. There we go. Okay, so this right here is the mapping of the course. The next thing that we're going to cover, determinate machines, will be the theme of the next part. I'm going to try a few different ideas for this series. The videos will probably be in slightly different. Maybe I'll present different topics a different way. Just part of that for me to experiment with what works and what doesn't. So the next section that I'm going to present to everybody, which will be, it's not going to be as much reading. We're going to talk about the whole machine behind the human biocomputer. Talks about goal seeking, servo mechanisms, determinant machines. So deterministic models, here, let me zoom in on that. Deterministic models versus stochastic models. A deterministic model provides clarity, simplicity, and repeatable outputs, ideal for stable environments with well-defined relationships. Deterministic models, one input produces one fixed output. There's no distribution of possible outcomes, and the result is a single value. Examples of deterministic models: linear regression, classification model, regression models, and embedding models. On the other hand, stochastic models embrace uncertainty and provide probability-based insights. They are essential in risk analysis, finance, machine learning, training processes, and any domain where variability matters. And stochastic models, one input can produce multiple possible outcomes. The result is often represented as a probability distribution, and decision makers can evaluate risk when using confidence intervals or probability ranges. Stochastic model examples: neural networks, random forests, and gradient descent, which is a term out of machine learning. 13 billion node hardware. Human biocomputer possesses 13 billion active neurons acting as the hardware, while the mind is merely the sum total of non-local programs and meta programs. And let's see. Yeah, Gestalt. There's a term called Gestalt. In occult architecture of the matrix, a Gestalt, is a German word, I think, refers to the whole-making principle, where a structure or system becomes greater than the sum of its individual parts. So when I was in psychology, one of my classes I liked the most, we talked about Gestalt psychology, in that the whole, you know, when you put a bunch of individual pieces together, or if you get a bunch of people together in a group, well, you know, think of a corporation or something. Those people can be organized into departments which have a purpose. You know, it's like an organ in a body. And so somebody did this, wrote a book where they tried to make like a toaster, and they had to go and mine all of the ore, and they had to smelt, and they had to do it from scratch. And the point was, he failed miserably. And so somehow when you get all of these people together and you organize them into a body corporate, they can somehow manage to mass produce toasters. So when the whole of that corporation or that corporate body, it's more than just a group of people. It becomes a higher level body, like an actual entity. That's why they're legal persons. It's an example. Continuing, rather than just a mere psychological concept of perception, it is the primary necromantic mechanism used to forge an egregore, a collective group mind or autonomous psychic entity generated by the synchronized thoughts of a population. This esoteric concept of the Gestalt serves as the exact spiritual foundation for the body corporate. By legally, socially, and spiritually binding human beings into a corporate fiction or globalist collective, the cryptocracy absorbs individual divine sparks into a massive artificial group soul, which the New Age architects blasphemously define as the Gestalt quality of the whole of being. Once a human collective is successfully fused into a Gestalt, resulting synergistic energy produces a zeitgeist, a spirit of the times that mimics the unified power of a rampaging crowd. Then the esoteric hierarchy. These massive collected energy fields are actively manipulated by and classified as principalities and powers. Principalities are ruling spiritual entities that govern specific geographical, political, or social domains. Feeding directly off of the analogy, it's like if I was to make what is a spirit? In the context of somebody like a school spirit, a holiday spirit, it's a mood or a vibe, we might call it today, a vibe that, other people can feel it. It's not just inside you, it's a spirit. It's an energy that motivates people. Peer pressure and collective emotion generated by the group. That's what it feeds off of. Therefore, to form a Gestalt or a body corporate is to effectively perform a macro level ritual that summons a type of principality to possess, manipulate, and definitively govern a unified human hive. That's what Gestalt means. Same idea being presented here. Is that, the human body is more than just slapping all of the parts together. It's like, if I get all of the parts that you need, that consist of a human body, and just like throw them in a pile, that doesn't make a person a human being. It's greater than the sum of its parts. Reality tunneling programs are frozen into the hardware as imprints during moments of acute bio-survival vulnerability. When the bio-survival circuit flashes danger, all other mental activity shuts down, rendering the human an absolute robot reacting in zero time. By that meaning, fight or flight, you have to make quick, decisions that are basically so quick, that they're done in zero time. And we're also going to talk about feedback loops and what's called the tote stack, the infinite loop of the meat machine, tote. Executed via a rigid cybernetic loop. Test, so tote stands for test, operate, test, exit. And that's a feedback loop. It's a fancy version of a feedback loop. So that'll be the next part. We're going to then look at the connection between demons and daemons. We're going to look at Maxwell's demons thought experiment as a thought experiment. Got it here somewhere. The Maxwell's demon experiment here has to do with the second law of thermodynamics. The idea being it can't operate by magic. Sorry, it cannot operate by magic. It must acquire information about the velocity and trajectory of molecules. That's part of this thought experiment. I did a video or a stream last week, I think, and I did a bit of a preview of this course here, or this subject here, but we're going to revisit it. There's other guy, Selfridge, who had a theory of demoniac assembly. Artificial intelligence and human perception operate on a pandemonium architecture. Data is processed by, and this is how he described it, a screaming chorus of cognitive and computational daemons, which is a background process, calculating certainty. So a decision daemon simply selects the loudest shriek to determine reality. Going to talk about how trauma effectively gives that fight or flight response, which then buries that experience deep into what we might call like the brain stem, the animal reptilian brain or whatever. If something happens that scares the living hell out of you, where you might have died, and that happens enough, the second something happens that reminds you of it, you will immediately go into that fight or flight response. So it kind of takes over in the moment. That's why they use trauma on that level, that severe level, to do the programming. Maxwell's demon, the concept of a daemon, it's a difference, but I argue that there's not really a difference between a D-A-E-M-O-N and a D-E-M-O-N. So yeah, this Maxwell's demon thought experiment was from like 1871 or something like that. The thought experiment was that there is an imaginary agent working tirelessly in the background to sort molecules and defeat entropy. In modern networks, daemons are banished, invisible programs that haunt the operating system and manage flow control without user input. So, with that being said, packet, how is packet flow control working? Well, you would use a program that runs in the background. You don't have to see it. You don't have to interact with this program. It does its own thing, and you don't see it. That's a daemon in Linux or Unix software. If you have Windows, it's like if you open Task Manager and you see all those processes, same idea. So that'll be in not the next video, but the one after that. After that, we're going to talk about syntax. I'm going to touch on the idea of quantum grammar a bit, which I teased in one of the previous episodes. I'm going to use a book titled The Structure of Magic. This is going to be talking specifically about language, the map versus the territory, deep structure versus surface structure, buffer overloads, syntax auditing. We're going to talk specifically about self-meta programming, how people can use this in a way to understand their own behavior. Generally, you know, how do you look at behavior? How do you try to, you know, what do you watch for? What are things that you need to be aware of? You know, how can you protect yourself against some of the tricks that are used? Let's see. Winning feeling, a dopamine hit, basically. And then we're going to end finally with just a few kind of things to wrap up. Human security, psychotherapy and negative feedback, cybernetics, obsessed with stability and homeostasis, conservative delusion, and an immunological wall, firewall, designed to trap human consciousness in the past. As you Martin said, cyber positive runway. Cosmos is driven by positive feedback. Directional non-linear runway circuits that reinforce difference shatter equilibrium. Biocomputer is not designed for peace. It is an extropic engine designed for mutation. And also artificial death. To be hacked by the future. Mechanistic desire operates as a nomadic, deterritorializing software that overrides organic eros. It's the carbon dominum is softened up by machine plague and digital contagions. The human ego is liquidated. The mind is abstracted and downloaded into the matrix, resulting in absolute meltdown. The terminal phase shift where human particularity, individuality goes extinct to feed planetary mechanistic intelligences. Those are going to be, each one of these is going to be a video in and of itself. So we've got a lot of detail going into that. Plus, we've got all of the little things to touch on. I'm not going to go into all of these things. You know, some of these are just to factor them into the video. I'm definitely going to touch on this book, Internet Daemons, by Fenwick McKelvey, because he has written one of the best books on, probably the only book on this topic. The book, Internet Daemons, explores the evolution of digital communication through the lens of software programs that operate in the background. The author, McKelvey, argues that the internet is possessed, operated, and owned by these daemons, background processes, which are generally responsible for flow control, process of managing packetized data to enable diverse network applications. We're going to touch on this. We're going to potentially talk about semiconductors a bit, because the idea, the steps for creating a semiconductor is basically just the alchemical great work. It just perfectly maps to it. We're also, this was a good video. I'm going to share it later. Indistinguishable from magic, manufacturing modern semiconductors. And he says in the video, the guy presenting, he says, the goal, and what's interesting, is that this type of graph we saw while we were doing the reading. This is, you know, the goal of creating semiconductors to make off offer, to make on sooner, and to make the difference between off and on sharper. So there's that. We have how all of this has actually been discussed quite a bit in the theology of Thomas Aquinas, diabolic psychology, based on Father Chad Ripperger's diabolic psychology framework. It's identical, absolutely identical. And let's see if there's anything else. I think that's pretty much the roundabout here. Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate everybody who's been here with me today for this. What I want to do is kind of just sum everything up that we got over the last few episodes from Project Soulcatcher, and I'm going to show you here are the main analogies between computer hacking and human biohacking. So the ones that I wanted to highlight here. BIOS override. BIOS is like a low-level software on a motherboard. So in computer architecture, the BIOS, basic input-output system, resides in programmable non-volatile memory and executes before any other software. Clever hackers reflash the BIOS with altered code to seize foundational control of the machine without alerting the user or antivirus software. Robert Duncan, the author of the books that we just looked at, explicitly maps this to hacking the executive functions of the human mind. The human BIOS represents the core operational segments of the psyche, the unquestioned deep-seated survival directives. By covertly reflashing these foundational beliefs through a targeted electromagnetic influence, a mind hacker takes absolute control of the human system from the bottom up, bypassing the conscious ego entirely, just as a computer virus copies itself to the boot sector of a hard disk to control the machine from startup and disable virus checkers. Mind hackers target the highest executive functions to dictate reality while disabling the victim's natural psychological defenses. So that is BIOS override. 2, denial of service, called DDoS attacks, and system crashes. A denial of service or DOS attack overwhelms a web server with thousands of simultaneous requests, bringing its processing capabilities to its knees. And human cybernetics, this is executed through sensory overloading and targeted neural amplification. By piping multiple connected minds or synthetic voices directly into a target's auditory cortex, the human biocomputer is overwhelmed by the data stream, effectively paralyzing the victim's ability to process real-world information. Robert Duncan notes another form of this attack is infinite looping, where the mind hacker forces a specific neural pattern to loop indefinitely. Just as infinite loops crash computer programs, human infinite looping causes brain lock, manifesting subjectively as obsessive-compulsive disorders or crippling paranoia. The ultimate goal of the sensory thrashing is to artificially crash the operating system, destabilizing the individual mind until it cracks, thereby simulating the exact symptoms of schizophrenia or psychosis, an act the CIA refers to as a remote lobotomy. Daemons and zombification. In computer science, a daemon, or service, is a program that runs invisibly in the background to handle systemic tasks. Robert Duncan reveals that this is literally the origin of the mythological concept of demonic possession. In mind hacking, artificial demons are automated background scripts injected into a human target to covertly trigger emotions and alter personalities without the host's conscious awareness. And that is precisely exactly how that's described, how Father Chad Ripperger describes the way demons influence people through emotion, which is triggered primarily through imagination. Either a person obsessing on a person, place, thing, perhaps, a drug or a game, etc. And connecting. Remember, they don't do cloning because of ethics, not because they can't not. It's expensive, but that the public in America mainly will argue ethics. You might need to clarify that. I'm not sure if I follow. I think I know what you mean, but maybe I'm not reading it right. Do you mean like yeah, you have to clarify. Maybe that's my bad. I can't follow along. Maybe I would. Even though, honestly, people might think this is crazy, but I'm a firm believer that anybody who is meant to find my content, they'll find it. To a degree, I really enjoy the fact that I can have the pleasure of talking to individual viewers and stuff like that. Because if I got to like 500,000 viewers or something like that, it would be so impersonal. I wouldn't get to know people on an individual level. If anybody who knows that they're going to be watched by 5,000, 500,000 people is just going to try to, maybe I would say that in private, maybe I wouldn't say it in public. Should I not say that because people might take it the wrong way? It's pros and cons, but so yeah, these are identical to the way that demons work. When a computer is infected with a Trojan horse like Black Orifice, it becomes a remote-controlled zombie, executing the hacker's commands while the legitimate user remains oblivious. Through biocommunication weaponry, the human mind is similarly zombified. Hypnotic triggers and sleepwalking tasks are cued as executables in the victim's subconscious, turning innocent citizens into remote-controlled slaves, assassins, or Manchurian candidates who act on the command and remember nothing. Oh, I know what you mean now. Yeah, it's yeah, people today, the reason they know about this stuff is because the movies have presented it a certain way. So sure, they could use techniques like that, but they could get people to swallow the pill better if they just say, we're just gonna do some optogenetics. We're using light therapy to potentially cause or to potentially cure illnesses, but really they're just using the lights to create these genetic monstrosities, or they're using optogenetics, using light to turn genes on and off. They can do this and they can word it the right way, and people won't even care about the ethics anymore. It's like people seem to care more about the appearance of ethics, not ethics like in and of themselves. I am advocating on behalf of this group, and that makes me a good person, is their way that people view it today. Absolutely. Great example what you said about possession. One gets in too deep. It does not help if they have previous mental illness. Yeah, man, there was we're going to get into all of this and more. I'm just giving a bit of a preview right now, but there's some really interesting stuff that we're going to get into on this. it's very hard to deny solely from the similarities and the way that these analogies work. I mean, these analogies that I'm presenting right here are perfect, and that's why we read the whole thing about Project Soulcatcher, because the analogies were needed. I wanted to give people those analogies before I present everything else. That way, I don't have to keep coming back and trying to show people that, well, yes, that there is a lot of reasons that we can look at certain processes this way, similar to a machine or a computer. There are plenty of differences too, mainly neuroplasticity. That's a main one, is that if a computer chip goes bad, you have to throw it away. But the human mind can kind of repair itself. It can, the pathways in your brain can actually regenerate, repair, I can't think of the words, neuroplasticity is the topic. Yeah, I've got it somewhere here. Port scanning, sniffing, and brute force hacking. Before a computer network can be compromised, hackers use packet sniffers like Moloch packet sniffer, or Archime, and network analyzers to map the architecture and identify open ports. Mind hackers use identical techniques by monitoring a target's brain waves while they are exposed to known stimuli, like watching television. Attackers ping the brain, map the input pathways, and sniff neural click streams to build a complete cognitive model of the individual. Once mapped, the attacker initiates memory probing, which Robert Duncan equates directly to a brute force password cracking algorithm. By scanning for brain trace echoes and cycling through permutations of neural stimulation, the hacker forcefully triggers memories. It is analogous to safe cracking. The mind hacker systematically introduces stimuli and listens to the tumblers, quote unquote, fall into place as the victim's brain yields a recognizable recognition response. They can present you with something and see if you recognize it, and they can tell if you recognize it. And the last is context switching and RAM refreshing. Operating systems manage multiple applications by context switching, swapping parameters and memory spaces so different programs can run smoothly without colliding. In the human biocomputer, emotional states dictate the context space. Mind hackers induce artificial context switching to create shape-shifting, quote-unquote, or split personalities within a target, partitioning the brain's memory banks to isolate knowledge and behaviors from the host's primary consciousness. Furthermore, computer RAM, dynamic random access memory, must be continuously refreshed via read and write operations every few milliseconds to retain its data. Human short-term memory and long-term memory, which are separate places in the brain, require similarly electrochemical refreshing to maintain potentiation. By maintaining these refresh cycles electromagnetically, mind hacking protocols like the CIA's EDOM, electronic dissolution of memory, can selectively interrupt while the consolidation process. Can selectively interrupt the consolidation process, actively erasing or altering a human being's memories by physically disrupting the hardware refresh of their neural circuits. Absolutely. It's exactly right. Parrot paradigm, extracting memories from a brain of pets who witnessed an event, emotional keyframes. It's exactly the same concept. So, guys, that is the end of that chapter. Again, you can download a copy of that book from the previous posts, and I'll put it in the post when I finish uploading this later. That's a bit of a preview. Well, it's a tool they have called EDOM, E-D-O-M, electronic dissolution of memory. basically has to do with the refresh cycles of your short and long-term memory. So what they can do is they can use this tool to basically, there's probably more details to it that I'm not thinking of right now, you know, make it so that certain things don't go from short-term to long-term, because it's two parts in the brain. And so your short-term memory has to be translated through a process over to your long-term memory, and they can affect that basically. And the idea being that computer hacking, human hacking are functionally identical. That is this term called a functional isomorphism. I wanted to show you guys that too. W. Ross Ashby, who's a cybernetic researcher, defines isomorphism as a similarity in pattern where relationships in one system, the example that I was looking at here was when I did the interviews with Michelle Gibson and the work that she's done. She found that airports, racetracks, and certain other things, you know, from city to city are organized and built at the same angles, the same distances from each other. This is a functional isomorphism. So the patterns in one system occur unchanged in another. If two dynamic systems are adjusted to match, physically or mathematically, they display a functional identity where their outputs will be identical given the same inputs. By duplicating the geometry of a high efficiency or high flow system, such as an airport, civil engineers essentially create a machine that forces the human components within it to behave with the same specific constraints and flow patterns. And so computer hacking and biohacking are fundamentally isomorphic with each other. That's very interesting. One morning you woke up and you can write with your right hand. That's very interesting. I've never heard of somebody who could just do it waking up one morning. I only know a few left-handed people. I am a right-handed person. But guys, I appreciate everybody being here with me tonight. Thank you for the longer stream. It did go a little bit longer than I thought it would, but no problem. I hope you guys learned something new. If you learned something new in everything that you do, nothing can be a worthless experience. So leave questions, comments, concerns in the comment section. Follow, like the video on whatever platform you're on. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody being here. What if we don't really die? What if it's just a test to see who gets invited into the China shop full of priceless China? You might be righter than you think on that. Look into the Tibetan and Egyptian books of the dead. And keep that in mind, because it's basically instructions for what you just mentioned. So everybody, I appreciate y'all. I'm going to wrap everything up. I have got to go and get something to eat and rest my voice a little bit. So everybody, thank you for being here. Let's see. Brain lock and OCD. Oh, yeah. Just as infinite loops crash computer programs, human infinite looping causes brain lock, manifesting subjectively, as obsessive compulsive disorders or crippling paranoia. It's just kind of like a feedback loop. You know, you look at something and it gives you this thought, and that thought makes you question that thing again. I would say in reference to that, look into circular reasoning. Basically circular reasoning there. Ideas to crash the operating system. So I appreciate it. Oh, also, I was going to say, I'll get all this stuff up on the docs and the notes site, and I'll put a link to all of this stuff so that everybody can read it and have access to it. There's some links already in the description on YouTube and Rumble and stuff like that. So, and for people on Substack, just check the previous posts, the previous episodes, because I've got tons of links and stuff on there already. So plenty of stuff to keep you guys busy, and we'll talk more about that in the other episodes. So thank you guys. I will see you again in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.